Most people think they have power, but in reality, they are slaves to those above them. They mistake obedience for strength and comfort for control. This video will reveal why you feel powerless in a world dominated by cunning rulers, and how you can rise through the 5 levels of power. But power, my friends, is never equal. It does not flow evenly among men, nor is it distributed fairly across society. Instead, it climbs in levels, stacked like a staircase, where each step upward separates the rulers from the ruled, the masters from the servants, and the cunning from the naive. To understand power, you must first accept that it is not one single force but a hierarchy, a ladder of influence and control that determines the destiny of every individual. And the tragedy is this: most people never even realize which rung of this ladder they occupy. Imagine the world as a vast pyramid. At the base, millions struggle for survival, bound by necessity, fear, and dependence. These are the masses living not by choice but by compulsion, trapped in a cycle of labor, hunger, and obedience. Above them, a smaller class commands slightly more authority, wielding rules, laws, and systems to keep the lower ranks in check. Higher still, fewer men rise to command armies, corporations, and nations. And at the summit, so scarce that they can be counted on one hand in each generation, are those who do not merely rule the present but shape the very future, leaving behind a legacy that endures for centuries. But here lies the cruel truth. To ascend from one level of power to the next is not a matter of chance, nor kindness, nor morality. It is a contest. A battle of wits, a war of strategy, a ruthless game where only the bold and cunning ascend, while the timid and virtuous remain chained below. If you wish to understand power, you must recognize its structure as a hierarchy where each level grants greater control, and with that control comes greater freedom. For what is freedom, if not the privilege of commanding others while being commanded by none? You may think yourself free because you make choices, because you speak your mind, because no master visibly holds your chain. But pause and consider: do you truly act from your own will, or do unseen powers guide your hand? The government you obey, the employer you serve, the culture that molds your thoughts. These are masters dressed in invisible robes. Yet they govern you more strongly than any tyrant with a sword. Those at the lower levels of power rarely see their prison, and this blindness is the very reason they remain there. Machiavelli understood that men are divided not by wealth alone, but by their position in the hierarchy of power. Wealth without influence is fragile, like a coin in the hand of a beggar, spent once and gone. Influence without command is hollow, a whisper without an army to enforce it. Legacy without cunning is forgotten, erased by rivals who rise to take your place. Thus, each level is incomplete unless you climb higher, and those who stop climbing are inevitably crushed by those who continue. The hierarchy is ruthless because it must be. For power is not meant to be shared in harmony, but seized, guarded, and expanded. Look back at history and you will see it clearly. Kings sat upon thrones not by divine right, but by eliminating rivals who sought the same crown. Generals commanded armies not because they were the strongest, but because they bent the loyalty of men to their will. Thinkers, philosophers, and rulers shaped nations not by being loved, but by embedding their ideas so deeply into the minds of others that even death could not silence them. This is the nature of the hierarchy. It rewards the cunning and punishes the complacent. Do not be deceived into believing that power is one simple possession, like a sword or a coin. Power is layered, it is measured, it is structured. A man may hold authority in his household, but remain powerless in the marketplace. A ruler may command a kingdom, but tremble under the influence of foreign empires. A general may win battles, yet fall victim to the whispering tongues of advisors who turn soldiers against him. Every level of the hierarchy contains its dangers, and those who do not understand these levels are doomed to be used as pawns in a game they cannot even see. And yet, to recognize the hierarchy is to begin awakening, for once you know that power rises in levels, you begin to ask the most dangerous of questions: where am I within this structure? Am I the servant who labors for survival, the obedient follower who exchanges freedom for safety, the commander who controls others yet remains vulnerable to betrayal, the influencer who bends minds, or the rare architect of legacy who shapes history itself? Most men will never dare to ask such questions, because the answers strip them of their illusions. They would rather believe they are strong while they remain weak, that they are free while they remain enslaved. But to those who possess the courage to confront the truth, the hierarchy reveals itself like a map, and with that map comes the possibility of ascension. To truly grasp the nature of power, you must strip away the comforting illusions that society feeds you. The morality of the weak, the sermons of the church, the promises of politicians, these are veils designed to keep you docile, obedient, and harmless. Machiavelli tears away these veils and forces you to look at the world through a darker, sharper lens. It is not a lens of what ought to be, but of what is. It does not ask whether a ruler is loved or hated, only whether he is secure. It does not weigh the purity of his soul, only the stability of his throne. When you look at power through Machiavelli's eyes, you begin to see that success is not about virtue but about control, not about fairness but about survival, not about honor but about dominance. Most men are prisoners of ideals. They cling to notions of justice, mercy, equality, and friendship, believing these are eternal principles that govern life. But Machiavelli teaches that these ideals are weapons wielded by the cunning to keep the masses in chains. A ruler who clings to morality above power is like a lamb lecturing wolves about peace. It will not prevent them from devouring him. Through the Machiavellian lens, you must understand that power has its own logic, detached from morality. What matters is not whether an action is good or evil, but whether it strengthens or weakens your position. Consider the ruler who wishes to be loved by his people. At first glance, it seems noble, even wise. But love is fragile. It fades with famine, with poverty, with envy, with gossip spread by enemies. Fear, however, is more reliable, for men will betray affection, but they will rarely betray terror. Through Machiavelli's eyes, the question is not whether it is right to rule with fear, but whether it is effective. And history shows us, again and again, that rulers who sought to be adored were dethroned, while those who inspired fear endured. When you adopt this lens, you begin to see human nature as it truly is. Men are not loyal by instinct. They are loyal only as long as it serves their interests. They are not honest by nature. They are honest only when deception brings no benefit. They are not brave by choice. They are brave only when the reward is worth the risk. Power, therefore, rests on the ability to exploit these tendencies. To rise in the hierarchy, you must manipulate loyalty, control appearances, and create fear when necessary. Through this view, manipulation is not cruelty. It is survival. The Machiavellian lens also reveals the difference between appearing virtuous and being virtuous. A ruler must always appear merciful, faith-human, religious, and upright, because men judge more by their eyes than by their hands. But to actually be merciful, or faithful, or humane at all times is dangerous. When the state is threatened, when rivals plot your downfall, when betrayal is at your door, clinging to virtue is suicide. The cunning ruler understands that appearances are enough. He wears the mask of goodness while holding the dagger of necessity beneath his cloak. Look at the modern world, and you will see this lens at work, though men deny it. Politicians speak of justice while buying votes with promises they never intend to keep. Corporations speak of equality while exploiting workers in silence. Leaders speak of peace while financing wars behind closed doors. The masses applaud their speeches, blind to the manipulation. But the rulers understand appearances govern the weak, while cunning governs the strong. Through Machiavelli's eyes, hypocrisy is not a flaw but a weapon, deception not a vice but an art. This lens also strips away the illusion of permanent allies. Men believe in loyalty, in eternal friendship, in alliances that cannot be broken. Yet history reveals the truth: alliances are tools, discarded when they lose their value. A ruler must know that yesterday's friend can become tomorrow's enemy, and today's enemy may become tomorrow's ally. To cling to loyalty without calculation is to place your fate in another man's hands. Through the Machiavellian lens, loyalty is never assumed, only negotiated, and betrayal is not shocking. It is inevitable. But perhaps the most unsettling truth revealed by this lens is that power is immoral. It does not bend to the codes of religion or ethics. It flows toward those who seize it with determination and cunning, regardless of how ruthless they must be. History does not remember rulers by the purity of their intentions, but by the strength of their reign. The masses may call them cruel, tyrannical, or corrupt, but what matters is whether they held their throne. To view power through this lens is to see it stripped of all sentiment, revealed in its raw, merciless essence. This is why most men reject Machiavelli's teachings. They prefer the comfort of illusions, the sweet lies of morality, the fantasy that goodness alone can triumph. But for those who dare to see clearly, for those who wish not to be ruled but to rule, the Machiavellian lens is indispensable. It is the mirror that shows you human nature without disguise, the map that reveals how rulers ascend and how fools are destroyed, the weapon that transforms weakness into cunning and survival into domination. Power is not merely about understanding the hierarchy, nor is it only about recognizing the ruthless laws that govern it. To master power, you must first look inward and ask the question most men fear: where do I stand? Self-positioning is the art of identifying your place within the ladder of power, seeing with clarity whether you are truly the master of others or merely the pawn of someone else's game. Without this knowledge, you drift like a ship with no compass, believing yourself strong when in truth you are weak, imagining yourself free while chains bind your every decision. The masses live in blindness. They never stop to measure their place. They believe they have influence because they shout their opinions, yet no one obeys their voice. They imagine they possess freedom because they can choose what to eat, what to wear, where to work, but they ignore the truth that every choice is given to them by those who stand above. To position yourself honestly, you must strip away illusions and confront the brutal reality. The level of power you inhabit is not defined by what you think of yourself, but by what others must obey when you speak. Ask yourself, when you issue a command, does anyone follow? When you express your will, does it bend the lives of others? Do your words carry weight beyond your own household, beyond your circle of friends, beyond your fleeting presence on this earth? If the answer is no, then you are not yet in the higher levels of power. To see yourself clearly is painful, but it is the first step toward ascension. The man who deceives himself into believing he is powerful when he is not will never rise. The man who admits his weakness with clarity can at least begin to climb. Machiavelli would say that most men deceive themselves into thinking they are free, when in truth they are chained by obedience. They follow laws they did not create, serve employers they cannot control, and bend to the will of rulers they never chose. They mistake the illusion of small freedoms for the substance of real power. True freedom exists only when you stand above others, when your decisions alter not just your own life, but the destiny of those beneath you. To position yourself is to recognize whether you hold such freedom, or whether you are still trapped in the cage of survival and obedience. This recognition is dangerous, for once you see your place, you can no longer cling to comforting lies. If you are at the bottom, surviving day by day, then your power is nothing. If you are in obedience, following commands to secure stability, then you are safe but dependent. If you command others, you may believe yourself strong, but you must ask, are you truly in control? Or is your authority borrowed, fragile, and subject to betrayal? The lens of self-positioning forces you to see that every level of power is precarious unless you rise higher, and that the higher you stand, the fewer rivals can threaten you. But self-positioning is not only about recognizing weakness. It is also about identifying hidden strengths, the resources you possess that others overlook. A man may not yet command armies, but he may command knowledge. He may not sit upon a throne, but his words may sway the minds of those who do. Power is not always visible in the form of crowns or weapons. It also hides in influence, in persuasion, in the ability to move others without force. To position yourself, you must measure not only where you are weak, but where you hold leverage others cannot see. There is also the question of ambition. Many men, when faced with the truth of their lowly position, resign themselves to fate. They say, "This is where I belong, this is all I can achieve." Such men are the fuel of history, burned and consumed by the ambitions of others. But those who look at their position and feel disgust, those who burn with the desire to climb, those who refuse to accept the role of servant, these are the ones who transform themselves into rulers. To position yourself is not only to know where you are, but to decide whether you will remain there or rise. You must also beware of false positioning. Many imagine themselves at a higher level than they truly are. The merchant who believes his wealth alone grants him influence may discover that when rulers shift the laws, his fortune crumbles. The commander who thinks his army is loyal may find that gold or promises from rivals can turn men against him. The politician who mistakes popularity for power may fall the moment the crowd changes its mind. To position yourself honestly requires brutal self-examination. You must measure not just the surface of your strength, but its roots, and ask whether they are deep enough to withstand storms. The process of self-positioning is relentless because it never ends. At every stage of life, at every shift of fortune, you must reassess where you stand. Power is fluid, never permanent. Today you may command, tomorrow you may obey. Today you may influence, tomorrow you may be forgotten. Only those who constantly measure their position can adapt, adjust, and survive. And only those who understand where they truly stand can plot the path to where they must go. Power, for many, is treated as a distant concept, a subject for history books, or the concern of kings, presidents, and tyrants. But in truth, power governs every moment of your life, every relationship you enter, every choice you make. To speak of power is not to speak of something abstract. It is to speak of survival, ambition, wealth, influence, and the very shape of your destiny. This is why understanding the levels of power is not a matter of curiosity but of necessity. If you do not understand where you stand, you will forever be ruled by those who do. Look around you. and you will see the fingerprints of power in every corner of your daily existence. When you wake to the sound of an alarm clock to go to work, that is not freedom, it is obedience to a structure built by others, a schedule imposed upon you. When you pay taxes, you are not choosing generosity, you are compelled by rulers who hold the authority to punish disobedience. When you bite your tongue in front of a superior, you are bending to hierarchy. Even in personal relationships, power dictates outcomes. The friend who dominates conversations, the partner who controls decisions, the parent who demands obedience. These are not accidents of personality, but exercises of power. If you do not understand this, you live blind, mistaking submission for harmony, dependence for security, weakness for kindness. The relevance of Machiavelli's teaching is that it strips away the illusion of fairness. Life does not reward those who deserve, but those who seize. The man who believes hard work alone guarantees success will die disappointed, for labor without strategy only enriches others. The man who believes honesty alone will protect him will fall victim to lies sharper than swords. The man who believes love alone will keep loyalty intact will one day taste betrayal. What you need is not faith in ideals, but mastery of the mechanics of power. That is how you rise above the masses who live and die in chains, never realizing the key was always in their hands. Consider your own place in this world. How often have you felt powerless, frustrated by decisions made above you? Perhaps you have watched corrupt men prosper while your honesty earned nothing. Perhaps you have seen rivals with less talent rise faster, simply because they understood how to bend others to their will. Perhaps you have worked tirelessly, yet your name is forgotten while those who manipulate stand in the spotlight. This is not chance. This is the cruel design of power, and the relevance of understanding it lies in breaking free from this cycle of ignorance. When you recognize that life is structured as a hierarchy of power, you stop wasting energy on illusions. You stop expecting fairness from rulers. You stop assuming loyalty from followers. You stop believing that morality guarantees safety. Instead, you begin to calculate, to plan, to strategize. You ask yourself, how do I rise one level higher? What resources do I control? Who can I influence? Who must I deceive? Whose loyalty can be secured? And whose betrayal must be anticipated? These questions, though harsh, are the ones that transform weakness into strength. In the workplace, the relevance of Machiavellian power becomes undeniable. It is not the most skilled who rise, but the most cunning. The one who understands appearances, who knows when to flatter and when to intimidate, who builds alliances only to discard them when they no longer serve. This is the one who climbs the ladder. Without this awareness, you remain a tool for others, your labor enriching them, your obedience strengthening their command. With awareness, you begin to shift from servant to strategist, from pawn to player. In politics, the Machiavellian lens is essential. Citizens who believe promises at face value remain forever exploited, while those who study the moves of rulers understand what is truly happening behind the curtain. Leaders do not act out of kindness, they act out of necessity. They do not give because they are generous, they give because it maintains loyalty. They do not punish because they are cruel, they punish because it ensures fear. To see this is to stop being deceived, to stop being controlled, and to begin positioning yourself to influence outcomes rather than suffer them. Even in personal life, the relevance of Machiavelli cannot be ignored. In love and friendship, in family, power determines who commands and who obeys. The one who controls emotions, who dictates terms, who sets the rhythm of the relationship, is the one who holds power. To deny this truth is to be ruled by it in ignorance. To embrace it is to gain clarity, to see whether you are leading or following, whether you are in control or merely reacting to the control of others. The practical relevance of all this is simple. Without knowledge of power, you will always lose to those who understand it. You will complain of injustice, while others manipulate justice itself. You will lament betrayal while others planned it from the start. You will hope for success while others seize it before your eyes. But when you understand the levels of power, when you know how to position yourself within them, when you learn to manipulate perception and command obedience, you begin to shift the balance. You stop being a spectator in the game of power and begin to play it yourself. Power is the silent law that governs all men, the force that decides who rises and who falls, who commands and who obeys. Through the 5 levels, we have seen how it begins with survival, matures into obedience, transforms into command, evolves into influence, and finally ascends into legacy. Each step is a battlefield, each level a test, and only those who recognize the nature of power can hope to climb. Machiavelli teaches us that morality, comfort, and illusions are the tools of the weak. Those who cling to them remain chained at the bottom, while the cunning and ruthless rise above. The question is not whether power exists. It surrounds you every moment of your life. The real question is whether you will remain a pawn within it or seize it for yourself. Now the mirror has been placed before you. You know the hierarchy, you see the lens, you understand your position, and you recognize the relevance to your own existence. The time has come to decide, will you remain where you are, or will you climb? Which level of power are you in? And more importantly, which level will you reach?